Hello folks, today I'm going to be taking a look at some miniatures for an upcoming Kickstarter by Westfalia. These are the Birdsung Dark Crusade figures. Okay, so something of a preview then for Westfalia's Birdsung Kickstarter. The fantasy Teutonic knights against the evil undead. I have a few to look at. But what I'm going to do is actually assemble them, and then I might actually give them a bit of a prime or something, because they're in this green resin for these prototype casts. So I don't know how well some of the details will show up, especially with things like the very fine mail on the knights. But you can see here, once again, Boris is doing the Lord's own work this time round with a whole slew of Templars or Teutonic knights coming up against some particularly weird undead figures. So I'm going to go and get them all cleaned up, and then we'll take a closer look at what we have here. Okay, so the Dark Crusade miniatures for the Birdsung Westfalia Kickstarter are all built. This is not all of the heroes of the Teutonics, but this is the sample I was set, and while my Zenith isn't the greatest in the world, hopefully it shows up a bit better than green resin on a green background. So we have Heinz the Giant, who in the Kickstarter comes with a little helmet bearer called Otto. We have Carl the Oak, Albrecht the Dwarf, Elfrida the Blessed, and Fritz the Missionary. So we'll take a look at those in a bit more detail. There's two others currently. There may be some unlocked with stretch goals, and they are Stanislav, who is a dual-wielding knight, and the Mud Wizard. I almost forgot there. How could I forget the Mud Wizard? Anyway, hopefully you can see here, very traditional Teutonic knight, sword and board. Really, really fine detail on things like the mail, which hopefully you can see partly. It's going to be very difficult in this because it is very fine. It will take a wash, a metallic, something like that, very well. Big crested hell, and really exquisitely fine detailing. So things like the straps on the back of the greaves are just picked out there, which is something that's often neglected for models. So very easy to put together. Obviously these are prototypes, and by that I mean these aren't cast from the final production molds. So sometimes, or in a lot of cases, when they make resin miniatures like this, they'll do a run, and then they'll go back and see how well they pull from the mold. And it's okay if you're pulling one or two. You could even destroy the mold off the initial one. But what you want is something that's going to stand the repeated casting process. So sometimes that means some details have to change. Maybe the position of an arm has to change a little, or a piece has to be thickened like a cloak, or there's something else that is just too weak to survive the process when casting multiple iterations. Anyway, these are as close as be damned to what I imagine the final versions will be. Heinz the Giant in there with his massive double-handed sword. How massive is it? It's taller than Heinz, so that's good. And again, very simple sculpt, just the chainmail and then the armor. There is, and this is not going to show up, his crest is actually two serpents fighting heads like this, which I imagine is what that was going for. And if it's not, I don't care. Crom. This gentleman is 37mm to eye level on that helmet. and around 45 to the top of his crest ish. Hinds, if I bring him back in, is around 32 to the top of his, or sorry, to his eye level, and about 41 to the top of his crest. It's a much more impressive crest. So we have Albrecht, the dwarves. They fight for the order. They're not quite as fanatically religious. They like to drink and swear. Again, really nice detail, little subtle things. The braided beard and hair coming from below the helmet, and then the helmet itself having some really nice detail on it, the studding and the like. And then that big two-headed axe. It's more of a polearm. It does make a cross, which is good, just before you batter somebody to death with it. So that's how you kill vampires. Probably my favourite, Elfrida, the Blessed, the Order Cleric, with that huge mace, studded, spiked. Remember, you can't draw blood, but you can break bones. This was the only one I had any major issues with. That arm, I can't get that arm to sit in there neatly and still have the mace across the back. Now, that may just be because I didn't clean that up particularly well. I may have had to take a bit more of the resin away from behind the elbow joint at the shoulder. So the elbow joint and then the cloak coming across it is what I meant to say. But it's a really nice figure carrying a thurible there. So sweet pungent incense being swung over the recently deceased to send them on their way to judgment. And again, some cracking details. And lastly, we have Fritz mugging away like Terry Gillingham. The big muggy face on him. Carrying his huge book, his scrolls, and his crucifix. Reminds me of being a kid. Having to carry that on the altar. I mean, he could just be in a standard white Teutonic tabard sort of strapped onto him. Or you could just turn that into a litany. Right all the way down it. He is, after all, a missionary, bringing the word to the masses. So, that's the heroes, done up very much like an adventuring party. So you've got a paladin, a cleric, dwarf, wizard, priest. I suppose he could be your barbarian. And then the other ones would make a rogue and a sorcerer of some description. There are 4 helmeted heads and 1 in a chainmail coif, which are interchangeable between the heroes who are interchangeable. So the likes of Otto and Carl, you can pick the head you want to go on them. They are not set, which is a nice touch. They will be coming up against a whole assortment of undead brought in by a necromancer. Here we see a few of the shambling band. So on the necromancer side, there's a dark paladin who, in a twisted parody of the Teutonics, also has a little helmet bearer, but he's carrying a skull, and he's called Nigel. And then the dark paladin is Rutger the Fallen. But in amongst them, we also have things like Cutter here, where the arms become these bone shears, which is peculiar. Then the overextended sort of spines on the overextended spines on the spine. It has that really twisted sort of Mjörkborg feel to things. And also one of the happiest smiles you'll see on a skeleton today. Yay! We have a little herder. Again, the individuality of the skeleton sculpts is really, really nice. Cloven hooves. So, God knows what this was in life. But in death, it's become a poking servant of a mad necromancer. Bone Christ. There's also a tiny little bone pope who is like a little halfling in a pope's mitre and robes, vestments. He's very thin. That cross is never going to support the weight of a real man. Thankfully, he doesn't have flesh and bones to weigh it down, so much easier. I like the idea of the necromancer sending these to torment and taunt the Teutonic knights as they make their way through. Then we have our drummer. So these have all been sculpted by Boris Woloszyn. However, there are some other bits and pieces in this campaign that have been sculpted by Max Morel. He does the sort of 3D design for Westfalia and One Gold Piece. So he's done a few bits of terrain. So there's a Teutonic knight being crucified upside down on a cross to defile it. There's also an altar along with the likes of the necromancer. And then Max's pièce de résistance is a Teutonic giant who is wielding a massive warhammer and dragging a church bell on a chain as some sort of morning star / flail. So fantastic looking stuff, and really, really nice, exquisite little sculpts from Boris again. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the whole range, and also hopefully some of those pieces from Max as well. But all the details will be below for the Kickstarter. So there we have it. Boris's ineffable style once again, bringing a whole host of monsters and heroes to the tabletop. These fantasy Teutonic knights are absolutely beautiful, and the detail is just sublime. And it's interesting, the more subdued human poses, they're very subtle compared to some of Boris's more outlandish work, and I think they still have a really nice feel to the sculpt, as if there's a heft to them. I think difficult to describe, but I like the weird and twisted that he does, and he does it very, very well. And then they juxtapose very nicely with just the basic human sort of form without being over the top. But these are going to be coming soon, so keep your eye out. There'll be a link below for the landing page for the Kickstarter, but this is only a small showing of what looks like it's going to be a much larger range, with a whole host of undead type monsters and more heroes of all varieties for both your skirmish and your RPG gaming. But until next time, bye bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.